It's coming down. It's been coming down for a while.
All righty. We'll call this meeting to order. Thank y'all for being here this evening. We'll begin the evening with a moment of silence. We can pray, meditate, or just enjoy a moment of silence to yourself. Thank you. If you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll move into the public comment portion of our evening. We have two people signed up. The first person we have signed up is Mr. David Todd. So, Mr. Todd, if you want to just take the podium, say your name, your address, and after you do that, your 3 minutes will begin when the clerk's ready. And be sure to speak directly into the mic, and there's no expectation for council or staff to respond to anybody.
Good evening, Your Honor, council members, Mr. Manager. My name is David Todd. I live at 96 Wilkie Way. Lived there for approximately 30 years, somewhere between 25 and 30 years. Before I start, I want to say thank you for your service, each of you, the manager included. I know working in the public as a public servant is a difficult and challenging job at times. I know personally, I'm the assistant city manager for the town of Brevard, so I've got a little experience in your side of the world. I have an issue that I wanted to bring to you tonight, and my neighbors are here as well on the same issue. But before I get into the details of that, I do want to thank the manager. He has been responsive in taking my calls and emails, and I'm appreciative of that because sometimes I've been a bit terse. I've been excited over this particular issue, so I want to thank you for that. My house is at Wilkie Way, Fletcher Hills, down Fanning Bridge Road, right below Windsor Forest. When the Windsor Forest community was constructed, that was before my time living in that neighborhood, or at least started before I did. My understanding is at that time, a lot of stormwater runoff came from Windsor Forest, and in particular to the low spot, which is where my house is, and then the Bland's property below mine. And we get a tremendous amount of stormwater. At some point in time, someone, I don't know if it was somebody in the city, a neighbor, or who, I don't know, somebody put a concrete restriction in the stormwater that runs under the street from the Windsor Forest side to my side of the property. What that restriction does is so I'm an engineer by background, it forms what's called detention time. So my neighbor's yard across the street from me has a large ditch. The two adjoining properties have a large ditch. And then the stormwater pipe. And on the far side of the stormwater pipe is where they put this concrete restriction. That holds a significant volume of stormwater when we get massive deluges, and allows it, there's an opening that allows it to come out slowly down a ditch into my yard and then into their yard. If that ditch gets extremely overwhelmed, my basement floods. If it doesn't even get extremely overwhelmed, their backyard floods or crawl space floods. So for some reason, well, another neighbor asked that the restriction be removed, and Public Works took the restriction out of the pipe. That happened last Thursday. On Friday, my basement flooded again for the third time in 30 years. They had a significant amount of water hit their property. So what we are asking for is, well, one, we're not sure why the restriction was taken out. We would like to have it put back. If it can't be put back, we'd like to have the ditch on my property improved so that it has an equivalent amount of detention that was in place prior to the restriction being removed. So we're not asking for anything new, we're just asking to be made whole. I am probably being a little ahead of the game and coming directly to you, as I know, would you like me to?
Keep going.
May I continue?
Keep
Thank
going.
you.
Yeah.
I know the manager has been responsive, and Mr. Presley has been responsive, and I appreciate that, but it would be another month before I could come back to you. And the one significant storm we've had since a restriction device has been removed resulted in flooding at my property and flooding in their property. So again, we're just asking to be made whole, for that to be put back one way or another. I would happily grant any needed easements on my property for folks to come in and work, or put the restriction back in. The manager did provide me with a North Carolina statute that Mr. Presley referenced about obstructing the stormwater line. The stormwater line was not obstructed. Obstructed means blocked. It was restricted down. It had somewhat of a nozzle put in place. And then the last thing I would add is a very similar situation happened in the town of Biltmore Forest about 8 years ago, where a restricted line was taken out. It caused flooding on a downstream neighbor. They had to go back and put a restricting type device back in. They put a weir in place. The manager has the city's engineer, McGill, coming out on Thursday to look at the property. I plan to be there. I've got my own engineer. I'm in the field, right? I mean, I know everybody around that's been doing it. I've been doing this for 40 years in this local area. So I've talked with my own gentleman. He may be there as well. I don't know. I'm curious to see what McGill says. But again, we're just asking to be made whole. I appreciate you listening to me. Again, I'm probably a little bit ahead of the game. Mr. Bieberdorf, thank you for your for being responsive and taking my calls. And I know I was not always the most pleasant person to talk with, but I appreciate that. When your house is flooding and your family's getting excited and your wife's stressing out, we've been dealing with flooding on both sides of my house for many years and have finally gotten it all corrected. Nothing happened during Helene, and here we are now, and we're flooding. So it's been a very stressful time for us. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Todd.
Thank you.
All righty, Mr. Bland, the floor is yours. And same thing, say your name, your address, and your 3 minutes will begin when the clerk's ready. There's no expectation for staff or council to respond.
Right, good evening. Thank you for hearing me.
Sure.
I've lived in 6 Wilkie Way, it's Tony Bland, 6 Wilkie Way, Fletcher.
Thank you.
Okay? And we live just below David, okay? And the culvert he's talking about and the ditch comes down to our property and then gets diverted from there. It goes into another culvert on our property out towards the road and then down to the creek eventually below the crossroads of Wilkie Way. I've only lived there 13 years. My wife has lived there 27 years, and the restriction that we're talking about was in place prior to my wife buying the property. In the 13 years that I've lived there, we've worked hard at maintaining the property. We've worked hard at putting restrictions in at our end of the ditch coming down through David's property. We've put rock work to walls in to slow down the water. In the 27 years that Brenda's lived there, there have been times when there has been leakage into our crawl space, but with the management we've put in place, it has not been a major issue for us. However, now that this restriction's been removed, the water can come down to our property that much quicker, and we feel that we are at a much higher risk of flooding for our crawl space. Over this last weekend, we've worked at diverting more water through our woods to get it to the roadside to avoid our yard. During the storm last week, the water in our backyard was ankle deep. It was getting close to our crawl space. Over the weekend, I moved 25 gallon buckets of dirt out of our culvert to continue to allow the culvert to reduce the speed of the water. So we are working hard to maintain the situation. I did email the town manager this afternoon with information regarding our situation, which obviously will be available to you at some stage. Okay. I think that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bland.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the end of the folk that are signed up. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? All righty. And Mark, maybe we can talk about that when we get to the end of our agenda.
Okay.
Our pretty short agenda. Alrighty. Moving on to the approval of the minutes. Any corrections, additions, or deletions to the minutes presented? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, motion carries and the minutes are approved. Moving on to updates from council, if there are any. Any updates? All righty, hearing none. Moving on to the consent agenda. Any questions, comments, concerns related to any item there? All right, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, motion carries and the consent agenda is approved. Moving on to our first discussion item, item number 7, the update on Tropical Storm Helene recovery efforts. Mr. Manager.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Council. Not a lot to update or additional information from the report last week. So several things. I talked to you about the improvements at the park and the repairs, and so we've got that first phase well underway now. It seems to be moving at a better pace at this point, which is primarily the repair of the fencing on the ball fields, and then some fencing and some court repair work at the multi-use courts, and then part of the dog park fencing. So dog park fencing is done. At this point, the fencing on the ball fields, they've made a good bit more progress since I spoke to you last week. So they had a lot of the posts up, but now some of the meshing of the actual fence, grid or fabric, that has gone up. And if y'all have been by the park, you should have noticed that, or probably noticed it. So that's happening. As long as the crews are there and they got materials, and the material delivery's been a major delay on this, but the fencing materials have been coming in, so they have to finish the fencing, some repair on the back stops. And then some of the surface of the multi-use courts still need to be repaired. And then some of the posts are in, and they've filled in around the posts, and then they'll do the fencing. And then that project will essentially be complete. I'm hoping the end of this month for a timeline on it, as long as they get the materials and there aren't, weather delays and things like that. But that's moving along at a better pace, I would say, right now. You got a question?
The end of the month, is that going to be for both the baseball fields and the courts?
I'm
Is
going to
that
be,
what you're hoping, or-
I'm hoping, I'm trying to be optimistic on that. If the
I just didn't know if
materials,
they were planning on-
because the ball fields, people put up fence, I know this is a little more complicated than putting a fence up in your yard, but once you get posts set, you roll the fence line, it goes pretty quickly as long as the materials are there and they got people to put them up. The backstop's a little bit trickier to put together.
Now, I was there last
but-
week, and
but-
one of the backstops is leaned in. Is that going to be repaired, or is it okay?
My understanding is it's going to be repaired.
Okay.
They haven't finished the backstops, so they were going to do them first, and I think they're doing them last.
Because of the
now.
baseball schedule, and they got something to kind of stop it for now. Yeah, I get it.
So and all the ball fields are the highest priority on this, so we've tried to convey that to them. They're trying to do some things simultaneously, like the repair didn't take long at the dog park, so they knocked that out. But they're trying to, while they're doing the ball fields, getting some of the items done on the courts, so.
Yeah, and then my
Yeah.
granddaughter had a ball game Friday. and
Did you-
Everybody, the entire group from both teams is huddled behind the backstop
Yeah,
because they were afraid of foul balls and stuff. So
yeah,
It's good to hear they're working on stretching the rest of
yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, we tried to push to get this done before they were playing out there, but, yeah, materials have been one of the biggest delays. But, so that's what's happening with that project, and Patton Construction's the general contractor on it, and they're using various subs for the work too. The other major repair project, as you know, is the bridge and then two parts of the stream banks. The one stream bank section over by near Mills Gap Road, where the Mills Gap Road Bridge is, and then the other one in the park, kind of directly across from the, not concessions, but the shelter, park shelter. So they did that. It was advertised on May the 4th, it was a week ago Sunday, and the bids are due May 27th. And then we're going to have a pre-bid conference out there with prospective bidders this Thursday at 2. They're scheduled to be out there. So, you know, we're hoping for good bids on that. Happy to finally seeing it let for bid, because this has been a ways in the making here to get done. The other thing that had to happen that delayed this, I talked to you, there had to be a scope of work, because you know all these projects are being reimbursed, at least on some level, by FEMA, and so that was another thing of jumping through all their hoops. So McGill's doing that simultaneously, letting the bid and doing the scope. They already had the scope of work essentially together, but doing FEMA's format for it. So, so hopefully, you know, good pre-bid conference on Thursday on the 15th, and then good bids for the bid deadline and bid opening. And we're bidding it at a formal level, so based on estimated cost, we think it may come in a little under it, but just to err on the side of caution there. So that's moving along. Unless there's any questions on that, I was going to talk about debris removal.
Sounds good.
So debris removal, as I mentioned last week, at least in town here, has gone along quite well. We started a while back helping, you know, with collection for at least brush at first, or vegetative debris. Hendersonville then started doing it, their public works crew. And then Hendersonville started doing C&D, or construction demolition, which is kind of that general debris. You know, it could be drywall, a couch, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. We started that, and we were essentially through. Now, I talked to Jabo today, and there's still some pickups popping up out there that people are saying is storm-related debris. You know, the counties monitor, checks that stuff, and, you know, sometimes things can be rejected, but I mean, it's essentially done. We're going to have some here and there. The brush is, I say essentially done, but there's still stuff people are pulling out, and I know they might question that a little bit, but, you know, a big tree down that's further back on the property that the owner hasn't had a chance, or hasn't been able to, or hasn't gotten to getting it cut down and removed and brought up, that was from the storm. I mean, we're still seeing stuff like that. You will throughout the county. So there is still some brush or vegetative debris materials to bring up, but not a lot. And we're working with the county and their contractor. You know, we're still staging the brush type debris over by the maintenance building, and then SDR and Debris Tech are working on removing it. So we're kind of nearing somewhat the end of this. It may be ongoing for a little bit longer, and I believe Hendersonville is getting there too. But today we met with the county, since they're, you know, coordinating it with the contractor, and the municipalities in Henderson County, and Lowell Park had asked to call the meeting, and I think it's more to, people are getting impatient in other areas where the debris is still sitting out there, and just to get more information from the county. The county's actually made, right now, remarkable progress as far as what they're estimating. They're about 2 months away from getting the bulk of all the debris that's to the right-of-way. They're still working on ones that are on someone's private property, and you can do a consent to get on there to remove it. So that's still, there was a lot of properties that had that in the county. So I don't know how long that's going to take, but that isn't as much of an issue for us. But they're getting done to all the stuff that's like up to the roadway. And then they're going to do a map, I guess, to show remaining, I believe, ones they haven't got to or haven't picked up. So that's something that's coming. Let's see, we talked about streams, debris removal from streams, because their contractor is doing that. They're taking this, it's awfully ambitious, and it could take a long, long time, but it doesn't mean they're going to work in every single stream, but they're taking the approach to try and evaluate all the streams in the county, which has a lot of streams. I don't know if that's considered just like blue line streams, and they may come and look at it and determine they don't need to mobilize people to do debris removal. But they're in the process still of assessing all of that. I mean, they've started work, they're not just assessing all of them. Mud Creek, and then there's been some others, and I asked, and I'll see if they produce that, if they can at least send us a list of the streams they've identified at this point in Fletcher and the other municipalities that are on the list to do some level of debris removal. Because that's been another big concern from residents after the storm. There was some near mostly Windsor Forest area. So hopefully we'll get that, but that's essentially the update on debris removal. But yeah, I just saw the county folks today, and we talked about that. Then the last thing, I just wanted to provide an update in there about reimbursement. So we've, at this point, it's 2 different disbursements that are a little over 133,000. So that has come in, and I think that's it. I just made a note further back in here, but I think I got to it. It was just on the details of letting forbid the bridge. So unless there's any questions, that's essentially where we're at with storm response work. But really happy to finally get that bridge project, and it's not a real complicated repair out there. But, the more we get storms, the more we get, heavy rainfalls, the more the possibility it could be knocked off its foundation. So, so that's all I had.
Okay. Any questions for Mark or Helene? All right, sounds good. Thank y'all for y'all's work there. We're moving on to your town manager's report.
Okay. So several things. I talked to you last week about Town Center project update, and I'd met with a attorney who works on a lot of economic development projects, and I had made contact with, his name's Ernie Pearson. He works for the large law firm. He works for 2 different law firms doing economic development consulting and projects, helping putting like agreements together, incentives and things like that. And I'd run across him at the last North Carolina City County Managers Association, and so explain what's going on here and the possibility for incentives or like good things to do in a public-private partnership to try and move that along. And so he's getting information out to his contacts. He does know some investors, and I'll follow up with him. I mentioned the marketing document that Summit Marketing Group. I should have that soon, and I'll share that with you. McGill Associates, the preliminary engineering work that they're doing on the town center property, the two different iterations of like a permit process, including fill dirt and things like that, to do residential, commercial on different portions of the main part of the property. They're completing that. They were waiting, I said, on the, we had the moratorium on no development in the floodplain, and so they were kind of, they needed to know what were the potential changes that you were looking to the ordinance, and I gave, or they know the ones that you are considering for next month, and so to try and incorporate, I know it's not a done deal, and you haven't passed it, and there's going to be a public hearing, but just, I think it was a good gauge of kind of some things they can do, that they could factor in to make some adjustments. So they have that information. And the last thing I wanted to mention, our prior developer of record, Martin Lewis Real Estate Group, and the engineer working with them, Will Bowie, they reached out last week and want to meet to talk about the project. So,
It's good news.
yeah, so I'm gonna see that, I'll be talking to them tomorrow afternoon. So, that just kind of came out of the blue. I mean, behind the scenes, every time I see them, I encourage them that they want to take another attempt at this, and knowing, the possibility for a good public-private partnership. So we'll see. But that's kind of it on the town center. The budget, so update on our operating budget. So obviously, we had our budget workshop last Thursday where I presented the recommended budget. Kind of the only thing hanging out there expense-wise was the renewal on our property and liability. We got that in, I think it was between $12,000 and $14,000 increase, so we'll update the numbers, and total expenses will go up by that. And we'll get one last set of values from the county that I'll try and plug in, or I will plug in before we get to the budget you would consider at the public hearing. And then the follow-up items you had, like we talked about cameras, public works, and the policy for the flock cameras, and the inspections. I'm working on that right now. I'll be setting up, I'm going to reach out, I hadn't done that yet, to the fire chief to set up a meeting with him. But I'll send you all an email, or probably multiple ones, to give you updates on where we're at on those follow-up items from the budget. But, so, yeah, then, and next steps is, I do budget message, and then it's available for comment and review, public comment and review. That would be advertised on May the 28th. And unless there's any questions on the budget. And again, for the record, I know for the meeting here, for public's sake, we're looking at keeping the rate, again, at 28 cents. So no rate increase at this point, and don't anticipate that between now and adoption. The farmers market, so thank you for those who came out. I had a conflict last week, I couldn't make it out there, but I heard it was well attended, and I think they did decent business for the first day. Tomorrow might be kind of rough for our second week, but so really excited to have that going now, and we hope it'll be really successful for the vendors and for the public that comes out to buy produce there. So I don't know if some of y'all went out, so hopefully you enjoyed that. Last thing was the ABC board. This is something I added from last week. So it was on the agenda, an agenda review for the update from the ABC board. So Samantha Todd, is the chairperson, did that, provided a good update. And then, one of the other board members, Brandon Olson, was here and made some comments about the possibility of establishing a capital fund like capital reserve almost type fund with excess revenues or gross receipts. And I just mentioned you want to check on general statutes about, authority and things like that. He called me last week and had a long conversation with him, and he referenced the general statute section. You got a copy of it on the dais here. I see y'all are looking at it. So the yellow highlighted portion just basically references after you do all these distributions that you have to do any gross receipts or extra profit. This would be after the distribution method they send to the town that goes in the general fund. They could, with your authorization, establish a capital reserve for specific capital projects, i.e. another store potentially.
Okay.
So, so that's something y'all will have to consider, and I guess it could be a future agenda item, and look at the different options.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you authorize that. You could look at, greater distribution of gross receipts to
Yeah.
the general fund. I mean,
Could we perhaps get some more information on that, and maybe have it as an agenda item next month?
Yep, we can do that. You mean more information from ABC board perspective?
I guess what our options are, and
Yeah.
maybe what makes the most sense after looking at the numbers and seeing what's best for the town and best for the ABC
Okay.
store.
They haven't put no recommendation themselves, have they?
Well, I guess they're asking for the capital.
I took that, I want to assume that that's an official, request from the board, but that they are wanting it. But,
Does it stop at a certain dollar amount? That's what I guess the question would be.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, it's
that's-
not just for enough information, yeah.
You could establish
So
some,
they asked to increase the cap. I didn't know what that would look like.
yeah. It's, I don't know if you would necessarily say a cap, but I guess you could set a cap or maybe a ceiling on the amount that goes in there. You could say only so much can go in there over a certain period of time. I mean, I don't know how much restrictions you want to put on them accumulating monies. One of the other options is they don't establish a capital fund, and they send additional gross receipts to the town,
town,
into the general
yeah.
fund. I mean, that's also, because they need to evaluate carefully, is it, truly advantageous, because that's a big capital
Yeah.
expense to build another store. Or it could be for other capital, replacement of items at the existing building. It could be set aside for that. But I think you'd want to, have a little more conversation about that.
I think so, too.
As part of a separate agenda item, staff report, have them part of the discussion. So,
Yeah, all of the above.
all the above, yep. That's all I had under manager comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments from Mark about that? All right, well, we had a couple of folk come and talk about Wilkie Way. I know you've emailed us some history on that in the past week, and I know we don't typically make improvements to stormwater outside the right-of-way, and I know we have an engineer coming this week.
So
So where are we at with that?
my understanding, and I'm sure I'll miss some of the gaps and what all transpired, but apparently there was water in the front yard at 96 Wilkie Way at Mr. Todd's house, and Jeva went out to look at that. Also looked at some of the other, I think, adjoining properties, maybe the Blands, and long and short of it, discussed that, we don't typically make improvements outside of the right-of-way,
Right.
and usually the homeowners do that, and we definitely don't try to do anything to make it, worse
Sure.
within the town-maintained right-of-ways. And they discovered that the drainage culvert was
Concrete
clogged up.
and, yeah.
Yeah, it was, whatever the appropriate term, it had stuff in it.
Yeah.
And within the drainage pipe there, the drainage culvert.
And so it was physically inside of the culvert.
That's my
Correct,
understanding.
yeah.
And then they removed it. And then that caused the concern about excessive
Yeah.
water coming through there down onto the lower properties. And then there was a request for either filling the pipe back up or improvements onto Mr. Todd's property.
All right.
And, you know, usually these conversations with residents, you know, explain, they'll check the, you know, any drainage components that are within the right-of-way. And sometimes we do replace a drainage culvert. It's not frequent, but, you know, it's
Right.
failing, or they've done some work on a swale or drainage ditch. But typically not outside of the right-of-way. And so we just kind of hit an impasse on this, and I suggested that we have, and sometimes we do have McGill Associates come out and look at a situation and try and get their assessment of it. So we're doing research on that. Because I know there's a reference to a similar situation in Biltmore Forest.
All right.
And so you'll hear more information eventually on that. And then Thursday at 1 o'clock, Ben Cathy from McGill is going to go out and look at that. And, I mean, he may not have completely enough time to really, you know, delve into it. We're going to get their initial assessment of, is it appropriate to clear the drainage culvert right there? That's kind of the immediate thing. And then, you know, whatever bigger picture suggestions that he has. So, and that's kind of where we left it.
Sure. It sounds like we're doing something.
Do you think-
Yep.
Oh, go ahead, Keith.
Do you think they'll look into the neighborhood above it that's putting
Could.
excessive amount of water down onto that area? Because if like the streets are paved and where it's not absorbing in and stuff like that, that like normally you see like a retention pond or something to some effect.
This is where I can't say Windsor Forest didn't do appropriate stormwater improvements
All
when
right.
they were built. They may have. And some of this is just flooding that occurs over time. And I'm not discounting people's observations, you know, pre and post Windsor Forest being built, but, I mean, sometimes we get, when anything's built next to another development, the comment, my flooding's worse because of that, and sometimes it's not, it just was an area that drained that way in particular, or it could be slightly elevated because of less pervious surfaces over there. I'm not gonna say there's no impact to Windsor Forest being built going down, but they may have put the appropriate stormwater improvements when they were built, so
Yeah.
to say they caused it, I don't
Go ahead,
know
John.
is accurate.
Well, and I just, because I want to understand y'all's situation and be on the right.
But we
page with
frequently
y'all.
get comments, or,
So the culvert was cleared after the water problem was found, so do we know the initial
Come on,
request
come on.
on the water in the front yard prior?
No, sir, a completely different issue. So the water line providing domestic water through our neighborhood is leaking.
Okay.
And it caused a big wet spot in my
Okay.
yard, which is still there. So I'd reached out to the city of Hendersonville and both the public works to ask them to
So
take a
that was-
look.
I read that in the email.
What I had
Yeah,
understood
earlier.
was they found no problems, so that's
That's
why
what I thought,
Jabbo
too.
went back. And,
Well, while they were there, another person who is not a homeowner in the neighborhood came up to Jabbo and showed him the drain for whatever reason that has been like that for all this time, and asked him to remove that device. And he is not He's not a homeowner, his mom and dad live on the property adjacent to me, but they, to my understanding, they're fine with it. Did you hear any objection from the Caudells from it being like it is? No, so I mean, it's.
Like I said, I don't want any water in your basement, don't get me wrong. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to, in my own mind.
Yes, sir.
Timeline out what took place. so-
Yes, sir. It was just kind of a random thing to take it out after it'd been there for, 30
Because that
years.
was my understanding too, that there was, we thought there was a leak. You all went to see the city of Hendersonville. City of Hendersonville said there wasn't a leak. And then
I'm sorry.
Jumbo
I didn't
came back
mention-
out
I
and then-
mentioned the wet spot, but yeah, the water department came in to
But
look at
there
it,
is a
is
leak.
my understanding, so.
I
Which
guess-
usually is a
so-
water, 9 times out of
Yeah,
10, it's a
yeah.
water leak somewhere.
And I guess my thing, I don't want to get into a philosophical discussion about restricting versus obstruction, but if we did make it worse by doing this, we should probably figure it out. I don't know what the solution is, but it sounds like the engineer's coming, and
Is there a temporary thing you can do, maybe till the engineer looks at it, if it's something as small as putting I don't know,
A boulder?
a boulder, or something that deflects it, and I haven't seen it yet. And I'm kind of curious what Biltmore Forest, I can talk
From what I've
with
heard
Jonathan
from
about that.
engineers is that one culvert, and I mean, we can get into a long debate on this and perceptions and water flow and
Yeah.
hydrology,
Yeah, just-
but
I'm
that
a-
you shouldn't,
Block.
you shouldn't block a drainage culvert.
yeah.
But it's-
I want to see what the engineer says then, so we can get to some
They
solution.
they
So
don't,
Joe's basement
they don't,
isn't
and I'll
flooding.
just say, they don't typically put obstructions
Right.
on drainage culverts, because that's
Yeah.
not, they're not designed.
Is that something where you just have to reconfigure the culvert itself?
I don't know that that's a solution. I think we're jumping
Yeah, till we
too
get the
far
engineer.
ahead that that's, in the overall situation here, so.
Because I know the problem is, it sounded like before is just, flooding their yard, but actually if it's getting in somebody's actual basement, damaging the house, but I kind of agree with Preston, it's like it's something that we caused, it'd be nice to
Yeah.
fix something on that, so.
And I get we can't have it obstructed, restricted, whatever it is, but if we can figure out whatever the
What are the
engineer said.
options?
Yeah, what are the options here, so their
And McGill did it
property
perfect,
isn't
right?
flooding.
I mean, so we might as well wait on McGill to.
Yeah, I
get their
think that's,
professional
let's
opinion.
wait, yeah.
Which, that's what, the bad thing is it could be a couple of weeks and it's raining now, so that's kind of.
Well, you'll update us what McGill has to say on
Yes.
this before the next meeting, and we'll
Yeah.
get updates, I'm sure, that
Yeah.
it's something that does need to be addressed.
I trust
I'd
that.
be willing.
Yeah, I know we'll get situated,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, I
let's-
trust that.
all right, let's just keep this updated, I guess,
Will
by the
do.
time Thursday comes, and
Yep,
we'll know how we need to proceed, I guess, or hopefully.
yep.
If not, we'll keep on searching. All righty. Anything more on Wilkie Way? Do we need to set a date for the budget year closeout now, Christine? Or do we need to,
You don't want to do that.
okay. We want to, and we could wait
wanna
till,
look at-
till June, but I think probably the sooner the better for everybody. And we typically do it towards the end of June. Does it need to be at as far as possible in June, or just after we pass the budget? What do we need to?
It's, let's see, 30th, that's the
Thank you.
very late, I don't
Have a
know.
meeting.
Yeah, that's a Monday. It's probably gonna need to be either the 22nd, because we gotta get as close to the end of the fiscal year to
Right.
get as much in, so, excuse me, either the 27th, maybe, or June 30th.
Okay, either of those is,
That's a
Fine.
Friday, I mean, I hate to do it on a Friday, but if,
y'all want, yeah. Is everybody okay with the 30th then, at some point? Are there best times for everybody? Do we want to knock it out in the morning?
Whenever.
First thing in the morning?
Or do we want to do, can we do,
Late afternoon, if it's easier on, depending on what's easier.
If it's late afternoon, I won't be able to be here myself.
I can do it in the morning. whatever.
Board meeting.
I can do it in the morning.
do we want to do 9 a.m. maybe?
I'm good with that.
Okay.
June
You good with that?
So June 30th at 9, is that? I'll make sure, Heather's the one I gotta make sure too, I mean, I could present the items if she couldn't be here, but she typically does that.
Well, if we need to change it,
Yeah,
maybe we can
we'll
just
get
let
back
us
with
know,
you.
yeah.
So, but June 30th, Monday, June 30th at 9, we'll shoot for that. And I'll let you know if that's a conflict, and maybe we do Friday morning if
Yeah,
that
well,
works.
yeah, it'll be fine, yeah. It'll be fine.
Okay.
All righty. And did you all meet about the farmer's market? Any discussion from Parks and Rec? Did I say,
No, and I'm.
I went out there, it seemed like it operated pretty fine.
Trust me, there'll always be constructive criticism.
Yeah, that's what I was
Somebody will
kinda
want to do
curious
something
about.
differently, but it generally, the comments that I heard is the business was very good, particularly the first hour, and then
Yeah.
it kind of tapered off.
okay,
I think Josh was very responsive to the handicap side of things.
Uh-huh.
Plus, they had some folks parking in the south lot.
Yeah,
That's a long walk. And
It
that's a
is.
gravel
Yeah.
section with walkers trying to get.
yeah,
So he was able to put people down right
On the other
immediately
side.
to the left on the
Yeah.
other side so
Good.
that they could walk over.
yeah. I was thinking that could be more parking for people, and especially somebody might have some mobility issues
Yeah.
like that, so,
But he
yeah.
was responsive and jumped right
Good.
to it and got him
Good.
situated.
Good.
what I perceived, it looked like it operated pretty well, so,
Yeah.
all righty, good. Any other business, for anybody?
And
Oh, go ahead.
another thing, and I know our residents are gone, I'm not bringing this up because they've left. Jabo's worked a lot on it, and he didn't have a chance to speak to the time that he spent out there and how some of this storm drainage improvements work. So I'd like him to have an opportunity to speak to it, because he spent quite a bit of time out there looking at the situation. And I went out and looked at it in the field. I didn't spend as much under the property owners. I think he went on the Bland's and definitely Mr. Todd's property, so.
I hate that's flooding his basement,
Yeah.
that's a concern. I thought it was just flooding his yard and it's just making a big old mess and actually putting damage to the house, that's a.
I was curious to see what the engineer says at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Okay.
All righty, any other business from council? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
We have a motion to adjourn in a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, we are adjourned. I know, yeah.